Awesome. Hey everyone, hope all is well. This is Sarthak. Welcome back to our channel. And this is another episode of Career Conversations, but this time I'm tired of inviting folks from consulting. So I'm inviting someone who is a consulting veteran, but is right now in a very, very different role. So today's guest is Mr. Abhishek Jain. And Abhishek has had quite an illustrious journey. I was trying to take notes from his LinkedIn profile, but he has had so many achievements that I gave up. He completed his graduation from Hansraj, then he worked for a couple of years with McKinsey, then he came to ISB to do his MBA, and then he worked with Bain and Company. He stayed there for 2.5 years, and then he shifted to Google. And right now, he's working with Google as a strategy and operations lead. And I believe he's based out of Dublin, Ireland. So, my focus today is not on his stints with McKinsey and Bain. I want to talk about his journey as an SNO lead with Google. So, to get started, Abhishek, my first question to you is what is SNO? Is it similar to a general management role? Is it similar to a consulting role? Because a lot of folks keep getting hired as account managers, program managers for Amazon, for Google, from the likes of ISB and IMs. So, how do you define this role? What is the similarity and difference with respect to general management and consulting?
First off, thanks for having me. Really glad to be here. Honestly, to your question, and I'll give you a couple of disclaimers first, right? I've never been in a quote unquote Genman role, so I
Sure,
can't fully speak to what that's supposed to be like, right?
sure.
The way I've always described this role is it's like having an in-house consulting team on retainer, right?
Got it.
Our core function is to partner with the leadership team of our business unit
Hmm.
to continuously think through and define
Hmm.
what where we want to go. So the
Hmm.
strategy part of it
Got
in
it.
the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months.
Hmm.
Um, then think through how to get there,
Hmm.
align on that vision, and then partner with them to land it.
Got it.
Now, there is a cross-functional element to it.
Hmm.
The projects and things that you work on can cut across
Hmm.
HR, finance, marketing. I'm in a sales operations role. The org I support is a sales org, so there
Got it.
can be a sales element to it as well.
Hmm.
In that sense, it is general, yes.
Hmm.
But functionally, the core role we're playing is similar to that of a consulting team,
Okay.
where you're always in partnership with the people in those functions
Hmm.
and working with them to land something, as
Got it.
opposed to assuming that role and doing that yourself, which is I think what Genman is about, right? Like you
Right.
rotate across different functions and you're sort of in it. This is
Yeah.
more of an adjacent sort of role, so probably more consulting-esque.
Got it. Got it. And can you explain more about what your day-to-day looks like in the form of an example or a recent responsibility that you've discharged?
Sure. Again, I think, look, stepping back, startups is a very broad term,
Hmm.
especially at Google. Lots of different teams that do strategy and ops, lots of different flavors to it.
Hmm.
Um, there are some roles that are very project based. So every couple of months or quarters, you take on new things and you keep changing.
Hmm.
Some roles that are more, you have business as usual sort of work streams that you pick up that keep
Hmm.
going on throughout the year.
Got it.
Um, so for example, for me, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm a part of a team that's called business operations for the EMEA business
Hmm.
of our SMB ad sales org.
Hmm.
I do a mix of things that are business as usual and run throughout the year,
Hmm.
like supporting business planning or headcount management, org design, things like that. And
Hmm.
then there are one-off sprints as well. Sometimes,
Hmm.
things that we decide, we're going to invest 6 to 8 weeks on it,
Yeah.
um, and you sort of dive deep and do that.
Hmm.
One project that sort of has been in and out of my portfolio over the years is hiring.
Okay.
We were we've been hiring a lot recently in Google in Dublin
Okay.
for the org that I'm in.
Okay.
So just thinking through the short to medium term plan on how to make it happen, right? And then
Hmm.
working with our recruiting partners, our HR partners, sales partners, central StatOps teams to sort of co-create the vision of
Hmm.
what we want to achieve, and then designing how to get there, figuring out the different objections and challenges, and then sort of having a little PMO office running and getting there.
Hmm.
That's really the day to day.
Got it.
So whatever you're working on, and then really it's like in consulting, everything changes very rapidly day to day, and a day is almost a unit of work where
Yeah.
you wake up in the morning, you align with your manager what you're going to do,
Hmm.
spend the day doing that, and then align maybe in the evening and rinse and repeat.
Hmm.
In I feel like at least in this job, it's more like a week is a unit of work. So you
Got
align early on in the week on
Hmm.
what you're going to achieve that week.
Yeah.
Um, and then days are a mix of problem solving sessions with your team and your management or your cross functional partners,
Got it.
focus work where heads down, you execute what you're supposed to do,
Hmm.
Excel modeling or presentations or documents, emails, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then just a lot of cross functional conversations as well to
Hmm.
test different things you're working on, get inputs,
Hmm.
get alignment, share, present what you're working on to other people. Um, and then, I mean, there's a fourth element of just personal, professional development, team building, whatever. Like
Hmm.
those are the four sort of things that you can spend your time doing.
Got it.
And each week looks different in
Hmm.
terms of the relative share of time spent on those things.
Very interesting. And if let's say Sarthak is an MBA graduate and he wants to get into
Mhm.
the SNO role with Google,
Mhm.
how should you prepare for the interviews? Is it your typical plain vanilla mix of cases and guesstimates or something else?
Uh, yeah, again, I'm not super close to what the recruiting process looks like today. It
Hmm.
has been evolving over time. I
Hmm.
can speak to what it was like when I interviewed, which was about 3.5, 4 years ago now.
Sure.
In general, I think Google interviews are a mix of um, role related knowledge, something we call GCA, which is basically cognitive ability, so problem solving skills,
Hmm.
and then something we call Googliness, which is really culture fit.
Hmm.
And so it's a mix of, uh, for me, it was a mix of case based questions, situational questions that were testing my problem solving ability.
Hmm.
Um, my and so for me, role related knowledge and GC was sort of merged
Hmm.
in that the core role is about problem solving and
Hmm.
thinking through different situation what to do, and
Got it.
then there's a culture element of it, right? Like there you get behavioral situational questions,
Hmm.
like this is a situation, what do you do, how do you deal with that,
Hmm.
what would you think about. um, so for me it was a mix of those things. So
Hmm.
uh, the core, how I prepared for those interviews was similar to consulting interviews. Like my main focus was
Hmm.
around those two things, like case interviews and behavioral questions.
Hmm.
They come in different flavors, but um, yeah, I think those. And the third thing is just having a clear, compelling vision of why Google or why this role, why this function. Um, that really matters, having being able to clearly articulate, and then why you, right? Why you are a good fit for the role and why they should, so why you want to pick them and why they should pick you.
Got it.
Um, Clear answers on those fronts is super helpful.
Got it. And why this switch? I mean, you had spent broadly 4 years in consulting
Mhm.
between two of the best consulting firms in the world. So, what was the trigger point behind, leaving Bain and moving to this role, which is very similar to consulting, but like you said, here a week is a unit of time, and in consulting, it's a day. Every day is different. So, what made you take this decision?
um, Couple of factors. I think firstly, I learned a lot from my time in consulting. It's where I got my start,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of how I work today, and how I approach problems is rooted in whatever I learned in those
Hmm.
jobs.
True.
Having said that, it was all I knew at that point in time.
Hmm.
And I did feel like, okay, I want to get some real world experience and exposure
Hmm.
on how things work, what a business actually runs like, right? And to sort of move from the consultant side where you're just advising and you're just looking outside in and then parachuting out to somebody else,
Hmm.
moving across the table to the other side where you're actually part of implementation and landing, and
Hmm.
owning something. So
Yeah.
that was one driver.
Hmm.
Secondly, at least for my stint in consulting, I was regularly rotating across projects and industries and teams and
Hmm.
clients.
Hmm.
And again, it's great exposure. You are exposed to a lot of different things, but equally, I was looking to go deep on something,
Hmm.
and then spend time building relationships, building expertise,
Hmm.
and going to a place of, okay,
Hmm.
I've done this for a while. I'm somewhat of an expert here, right? I
Hmm.
know what I'm talking about.
Got
I
it.
was missing that,
Hmm.
and this role allowed me to do that.
Very true.
Um, and then I think the third piece of it is just lifestyle, right? Like it's no secret, consulting can be intense.
Hmm.
Um, and I was there during COVID
Hmm.
as well. So it was mainly, working from home and so on. And so there was an element of, okay, I want to uh, sort of reset my life, my lifestyle, and so on. And then the fact that this opportunity was also in Europe gave me a chance to explore different geography, a different culture. And so it was a good way to sort of take stock of my life and just try something different. So yeah, like that was really the thinking behind making the move.
Yeah, I mean, I love the whole comparison of parachuting and landing. If you have to draw a parallel to the kind of work that you're doing right now, which is formulating and executing a hiring strategy for Google in Dublin, if let's say Google had outsourced this to a consulting firm, then a consulting firm, let's say like an Aon or a McKinsey, would have just made the hiring strategy, and then Google would have had to implement it on its own, if I'm not wrong. Got it.
I mean, I think so. Again, I've never seen something like that done with an external partner, but I would assume so. And again, I'm only working on one part of the business in Dublin, so I won't speak for the entire site and the entire org. I'm
Hmm.
a part of the GCS business, that's SMB ad sales, and so
Hmm.
my work around hiring was focused on that.
Hmm.
Um, I think in the example that you laid out, like the challenge is from start to finish, right? Figuring out how many people you need where,
Hmm.
right? And that's then rooted in business planning and how your business runs and where growth is coming from.
Hmm.
Then marrying that to the mechanics of people flowing in and out of the business,
Very true.
things like nutrition,
Hmm.
internal transfers, and so on. And then trying to put your finger on where you actually need to make assumptions and where people are genuinely leaving. They've already, like, just marrying all that together.
Yeah.
It requires a certain amount of depth and time spent in the business to understand the nuances of what's going on,
Yeah.
which is tricky for an external partner to do. And I'm not saying you can't do it, you can. You would just spend a lot more time ramping up
Hmm.
on, and for me at least, it's been a few years now in the business doing it, and so each year is different, and so
Hmm.
you can sort of juxtapose context
Hmm.
and knowledge about the business and about how things run with each year's different situation and circumstances, and
Hmm.
make sure that you're always doing something that feels fresh and current, but
Yeah.
also grounded in an understanding of how things are supposed to run,
Hmm.
as opposed to always spending time going from zero to one to understand what the landscape is like.
Got it.
I think, and also we do play a little bit of that role as well, in that at the end of the day, we're an advisory or partnering with the business to land something. We're not, my team isn't a sales team, so we're not actually doing the ad selling. We're
Hmm.
not recruiters. We're not HR. We're not finance,
Hmm.
right? We're not any of the people whose core sort of responsibilities are directly tied to or impacted by the
Hmm.
hiring we're doing. We are something of an external partner internally within the business,
Hmm.
trying to see the end-to-end value chain of
Got it.
um, people and movement, and
Hmm.
then figuring out where to do what.
Got it.
um, there's also an element of, when you're an internal team,
Hmm.
there's a lot more transparency in terms of information, data, business priorities. I think there's a lot of implicit trust because you're all playing for the same team.
Hmm.
Versus, I think in a consulting dynamic, you spend a lot of time and
Hmm.
energy building and maintaining that trust with your stakeholders,
Got it.
and reassuring them that what you're saying is in their interest.
Hmm.
There's a commercial element to it as well, right? Where you have a contract, you have to renew the contract, whatever. Um, and don't get me wrong, those things can work very well in many situations. And there's a reason that industry is so successful and so large. But you can cut through a lot of that noise when you're in an in-house team, and
Got
you know that your priorities are all aligned. You want to do what's best for the business, and so it's easier to collaborate in that setting.
Got it. Just one last question for you, which is in terms of pay packages and career trajectory, how would you
Mhm.
demarcate and differentiate between management consulting and SNO in a conglomerate?
Again, look, each company is different,
Hmm.
um, and it's hard to sort of do a like for like. A
Hmm.
couple of things stand out, right?
Hmm.
Um, Consulting is more intense, but it's also more growth, and you move up more quickly. You
Hmm.
transition to management more quickly. There is almost a set curve that you're following, where every 2 years pay goes up, title goes up, responsibilities go up, right?
Hmm.
And in many places there is an up or out element to it as well.
Hmm.
Um, in consulting, sorry, in MNCs and industry roles, from what I understand,
Hmm.
that isn't as sharp, in that you're not there's no set path that you're following, right? Promotions
Hmm.
aren't a given, growth isn't a given. There isn't necessarily as much uh, I won't even say there isn't as much opportunity, because the flip side is there isn't that much of an up or out culture,
Hmm.
right? So on both sides, like you have more space to do what you're doing, and there's no one constantly like pushing you
Hmm.
to think about the next promotion and the next role and whatever.
Hmm.
There's no danger of, oh, if I don't get this promo, I'm going to be like managed out.
Got it.
Equally, there is no set path of, in 2 years I will do this, and then in 4 years I'll become a manager and whatever. So that's the first sort of difference.
Hmm.
I think secondly, um, at least the shift that I've seen at Google is there are a lot more and a lot more senior individual contributor roles.
Hmm.
In consulting, usually, you're an IC for 2 to 4 years, depending on your experience, and then you move to a project manager role and then up. And then so that element of management comes early,
Okay.
because you need leverage, right, in
Hmm.
order to maximize your impact.
Hmm.
Um, there are fewer manager roles to go around
Hmm.
in startups orgs, and you'll see a lot more ICs, a lot more senior ICs,
Hmm.
um, just doing things themselves, which again, depending on what you like,
Hmm.
can be good or bad for you.
Hmm.
Um, I think, yeah, in terms of trajectory, those are the two things, and I think the third thing is just in terms of overall career pathing and trajectory, right? Because in an industry role, you're adjacent to a lot of functions and business roles and teams.
Hmm.
There is an element of you can explore a lot more through mobility,
Hmm.
right? Because a lot of people, what I've seen them do is they'll work in a role next to like a sales team, right? They want to try sales. So in 2, 3 years, they'll then take on a sales role,
Very true.
or they'll move to an HR role, or they'll move to a finance role. Um, and so from within, you're able to navigate those things a bit more smoothly,
Hmm.
as opposed to, and you can do that with more confidence because you've been there, done that, you know what you're talking about, at least to some extent.
Hmm.
Versus with consulting, I think sometimes what people run into, especially at more, well, again, there gives and gets, but it's sometimes hard to break into industry from consulting, right? For many
Hmm.
reasons. Um, yes, you're paid much better very early on, so it can
Hmm.
be difficult to get the same money
Very true.
for for your level of experience. Um, there's often an element of what are you bringing to the table in terms of expertise, because you may
Hmm.
have worked across industries and so on.
Hmm.
Versus in-house, you can build up that expertise, and so that's more compelling. Of
Yeah.
course, as a consultant, you bring in an external perspective, an ability to problem solve, and ramp up on things quickly. So they're different. Again, they're different pluses to both.
Hmm.
But yeah, the third thing I think would just be the ability to move horizontally to
Hmm.
different types of roles.
Got it.
Um, is easier somewhat in a large company with a lot
Mhm.
of different departments and functions and teams.
Very true.
So that'll be the third differentiator.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Abhishek, for this conversation. Was supremely insightful. I was taking notes throughout because the insights were so trenchant and so original that I'm pretty sure that it will help everybody listening to this conversation. And thank you so much on everyone's behalf once again.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, happy to help.
Thank you.